Work. It's more than just something we do to make ends meet. So much of our time and energy are devoted to work that it has a way of defining our lives. For some, perhaps a lucky few, work provides more than just a simple paycheck. It provides purpose, meaning, maybe even a sense of belonging and happiness in this life. So, that being the case, we can then safely pose the question, why would the next life be any different? Hello and welcome, my freshwater friends, to episode 2 of the About the Water podcast, an exploration of high strangeness on and around the Great Lakes. Today, you and I will be boarding an icy Lake Superior freighter and joining 2 crewmen as they go about their duties, both of whom love their work. One, alive and well. The other, a devoted spirit, one whose legacy will forever live on. About the Water. Episode 2. Carry on, Benny. Tomlinson Russell, who prefers the name Russell for, as he says, obvious reasons, admits that it wasn't the allure of the Great Lakes that led him to go to work as an iron ore freighter deckhand, but rather the comfortable paycheck and chance to broaden his horizons. He quickly, however, fell in love with both the work and the lakes. A hard worker, Russell was known for his reputation of never putting a foot wrong. He'd spend his on-duty hours working diligently at a variety of tasks, and his off-duty hours taking in the majesty of the open waters. The lakes had an ever-changing character, one which never failed to intrigue and awe Russell. On one particular early November crossing, Russell found himself lucky enough to be off-duty as the ship traversed from Lake Superior to Lake Huron. The 9-hour passage through the Soo Locks and St. Mary's River was something he looked forward to during every voyage. Russell eagerly tossed his utility vest and hard hat into his locker, ready to go relax and observe, when something unusual inside the locker caught his eye. Written in what appeared to be some kind of black chalk or China marker was the message, "Aft stair rails, chip ice." Before Russell could process the message, or even consider how it got inside his locker in the first place, he was suddenly interrupted by his supervisor, who was standing in the locker room doorway. "Russell, the stairs and rails in back need the ice removed. Guys outside are ready for the locks and it's all slippery and unsafe," the supervisor said. Russell put on his gear once again, assuring the supervisor in a somewhat sarcastic tone that he had already received the message. The supervisor looked puzzled at the comment, but then quickly set off in response to an urgent radio call. Russell went to work as instructed. He was furious. Not that he had been put back on duty, but that his boss would so blatantly violate his privacy by accessing his locker somehow. Later returning, task completed, Russell went back to his locker. Entering the combination, which only he knew, he opened the metal door. The old message had somehow been wiped clean, and a new one put in its place. "Good work. Your orders, sir." Russell slammed his locker door, angry and bewildered. His combination was something that only he knew. A random series of numbers, nothing that could be guessed using birthdays or anniversaries. Even if someone could guess it, the crew had a very strict code of honor that all lockers and personal effects were strictly off limits to other crew members. The only conclusion that Russell could come to was that his supervisor must have a key. In examining the locking mechanism, however, Russell found that there was, in fact, no keyhole. He inspected the locker further and found no signs of tampering or forced access. He decided in that moment to change his combination once again, and he told no one. Over the next few days, Russell would receive several more messages, all containing that same phrase, "Your orders, sir." At first, the messages were confined to just his locker, but they soon began to show up elsewhere, and with greater frequency. One would be found written onto the surface of a small desk in Russell's quarters. Unable to wipe it clean, Russell returned only minutes later to find it completely gone. Another message would be found etched into the mirror of a shared crew bathroom. Russell noticed it in the morning, but in the afternoon, it was gone. He knew the mirror would not have been replaced, as he would have been the one assigned to the task. The final straw came one evening when Russell was once again in front of his locker. Relieved to find no message inside, he was sitting on a small bench, changing his work boots. Suddenly, the locker door slammed shut. Russell was so startled that he fell backwards over the bench and onto the floor. Frightened and breathing heavily, he pulled himself up. Looking around, Russell clearly saw that there was no one else in the room. The locker door had slammed itself shut. Terrified, Russell cautiously approached the locker. He entered the combination and slowly opened the door. No, he said, voice trembling. Inside the locker, there it was. The message that hadn't been there just a moment ago. "Your orders, sir." Not knowing what else to do, Russell scrambled out of the room to go see the captain. Knowing of Russell's excellent record and reputation, and seeing the look of concern on Russell's face, the captain was more than willing to hear his concern. The captain stared inquisitively towards the floor, his back to Russell, who was explaining the whole story. "What did the messages say?" the captain asked. Russell explained that, aside from the first message, they all simply read, "Your orders, sir." The captain let out an audible chuckle, his eyes now looking skyward as he shook his head. "He must think very highly of you," the captain said. Confused, Russell asked to whom the captain might be referring. "Benny," the captain offered. "I'm glad to hear he's still on board." Offering Russell a seat, the captain began to recount the story of his favorite crewman. "Benny was a lot like you, Russell. Kind of under the radar, but hard-working, polite, respectful, you know. He loved his job. We worked together on a couple different vessels, but he always called this one his bride. It was his whole life. Benny was just a good guy." The captain's face then changed from an expression of fond remembrance to one of sadness. In the process of changing owners, the shipping company decided to lay off the more seasoned and thus higher-paid crew members. The captain shook his head in frustration, explaining how he was given no say in the matter, and no alternative than to terminate Benny's employment, or else. The captain then explained how, on one particular evening, he saw Benny walking up the gangplank, boarding the ship, trying to blend in with some other crewmen. "I ordered a ship-wide search but never did find him on board. A couple other guys said the same thing, seeing him here and there for the entire passage, but we never did find him." Sadly, upon further investigation, the captain and crew learned that Benny had tragically taken his own life, roughly 1 month prior to his first sighting. The captain then stood, seeming regretful, as if he had shared too much information, and ushered Russell towards the door. "You're not the only one who's seen these messages, Russell. I did for a bit, and some of the other guys did too. From what we figure, he finds a guy with a good work ethic and looks to him as a sort of supervisor. He just wants to work, so give him a task or tell him to just carry on. It tends to make the messages or anything else weird stop. Practically shoving Russell into the hallway, the captain then closed the door. Mouth agape, Russell stood motionless and speechless, stunned, in disbelief over what he just heard. The captain was not one to tolerate nonsense stories or superstitions on his ship. Still staring at the closed door, Russell eventually regained his composure and made his way back to the locker room. When he arrived, Russell approached his locker, entered his combo, and froze. He knew that message was still inside, and he was frightened to see it. "Carry on, Benny," Russell offered, opening the door. To his amazement, during the brief couple of minutes the captain had given him, the previous message had been wiped completely clean, with nothing new in its place. For years, Russell would say those words daily. In time, Russell's fear of the supernatural subsided. He found himself fortunate to work beside one of the greatest sailors who had ever graced the Great Lakes. He cherished his friendship with Benny, and still does, even though Russell never saw another message again. I wanted to pass this story along to you early in this series for a couple of reasons. Firstly, because I think most of us Great Lakes lovers can relate to both Benny and Russell. These waters have a quality to them that just continuously draws us in, making us want to be a part of this place, making us want to be a part of their ongoing story. And secondly, because the day I was given this story was one of my favorite days that I've ever had on the Great Lakes. It was my first time seeing Whitefish Point on the southern shores of Lake Superior. While taking in the view, I noticed an older gentleman giving an amateur salute out towards the water, and I just couldn't help but strike up a conversation as to why. The detailed conversation that followed is the story you just heard, as told by Russell himself. So Russell, if you're listening, thank you very much for sharing. And Benny, I hope you're out there listening somewhere as well. Carry on, our dear friend. And with that, thank you sincerely for listening. My name is Will, and I'm looking very forward to sharing these stories with you. Thanks so much for allowing me to exist as a moment in time in your story. May it be as grand, beautiful, and enduring as our Great Lakes. I'll see you about the water.